1. So I worked at DQ for 2 months at this point, when we started getting the shows. Where I live, everything happens all at once. So you'll get one day where 20 events will happen, like a car show, a gun show, a monster truck show, a volleyball game, a soccer game, a theater show, a local band show, etc. Which means we'd have a very, very busy day at old DQ. Well, on this one day, it was one of those days that everything was happening. Even a circus was in town that day, and it was Veterans Day too. We had a line going out our doors and all the way into the middle of the parking lot. Now, it's not unusual that we have people waiting in long lines. Well, we were told to screw the number placards because we don't have enough in the first place. And it was mid-virus, meaning that we'd have to clean them before we could give them to another customer, so it was chaos. Both in the lobby and in the drive-thru. Mind you, I was the only employee that worked the lobby since most people didn't like it. Anyways, everything was going well. I only got pulled aside 18 times to be told that I should have more help, and only 6 people complained at that point that their food hadn't made their way to them. And, how could you serve people that came after us before serving us? Before anyone asks, usually the people that got their food before everyone else were fish orders, since fish isn't the most popular thing here. Among the chaos, a woman came in and asked for a 2-adult and 2-kid order, which wasn't that bad, but since it was all the popular menu items that day, I warned her that it would be a bit of a wait, since we had a whole parking lot waiting for similar items. Well, her order comes up and I called it out, since I was so tired that I wasn't interested in going searching for her. Apparently, she went to the bathroom, and since I didn't get a response or see her, I moved on to the next customer's order. Well, she came out and says, "I think that's my food?" In a snarky tone. I mean, I get it. She waited at least 30 minutes to get her food, so I went and grabbed it. I admit I wasn't doing my best that day and forgot her cups, so she said, "So I don't get drinks?" And I apologized and said I'd get them right away. And she threw the food at me and said, "No, screw you, I want a damn refund, this is utter bull." Only with more cursing. So I apologized again and go for my manager. I didn't realize the woman decided that cussing me out wasn't enough, because my manager came over when she heard the shouting, and around that time, I turned around to come tell her. And my manager rushed at me, pushed me aside, and grabbed this woman's arm. She was about 2 inches away from almost hitting me while my back was turned. My manager told her to get out from behind the counter, if she didn't want charges to be pressed, and the whole time she was getting her refunded, she was cussing out my manager, cussing out me, and promising not to come back. I felt so exhausted that I felt like my legs were going to give out. Oh, and the lady kept her promise of never coming back again, though if she did, the store manager would have kicked her out. But she was the most wild person that I met while working there. Hellfreezer's note, why oh why did she get a refund? She got her food, she chose to throw it. That's entirely on her. She could have gotten her drinks as well if she wasn't such a farty head. Anyway, sorry for the harsh language. Moving on. 2. I worked my current cashier position for 10 years, and because of that, I was often given new cashiers to train. Basically, learning to be a cashier takes about a week to learn the basics, and about a month to get all the nuances. That being said, most are trained for 3 days and thrown to the wolves. Oh! However, I was given a cashier in the slow part of the year. She was trained thoroughly and had one-on-one support every moment for a month. Despite this, I noticed that she was very dependent on me, asking for backup on register if there was one customer waiting, asking me to do phone sales for her, and refusing to ask for help from anyone but me. I would review anything that she said had an issue, but she would just claim that I was better or faster at the task. I decided to keep myself busy with other tasks, cleaning, administrative, restocking, to encourage her to be independent. I reminded her that while the cashier supervisor and I were only a call away, the goal was to be able to work independently most of the time. However, this behavior didn't change. In fact, she would say she had a question to get me to come over, and when I would remark on how long the line had gotten, she'd jump on another register and leave me to solve whatever issues she was having. This was annoying, but unharmful during the slow season. Now that it's busy season, it has become an issue. Now I'm rarely with her a whole shift as I have to cover lunches and help at customer service. Typically, I spend about 4 hours away from my primary station a day. Now this cashier refuses to call the cashier supervisor for anything while I'm away. She will not ask for an override, change, receipt tape, anything. Because of this, I often come back to upset customers who are either told that they had to wait for me or the register area is in chaos. No cash, only one register with receipt tape, long lines. The biggest issue lately is that she will not ask for a break, but have associates call the cashier supervisor to ask for her break. The other associates will not know that I am scheduled somewhere else, and start laying into me about how I am not at my station, and how this cashier hasn't had a break. I even had another associate confront me about it, but I was able to show him the break schedule. The problem is, even though this cashier gets credit cards like no one's business, she's failing to work independently. What's also annoying is while I meet credit goals, I don't exceed in the way this cashier does. And management sees my concerns as sour grapes. Hellfreezers note the only way to help her is to let her flounder and mess up a bit, make sure that any mistake that happens is something that will fall back on her. Sounds like she's capable of doing the job, she's just refusing to exercise a bit of independence, and you certainly need that in retail. I don't know if you've had a direct conversation with her about this, but you need to. Have someone there as a witness so she doesn't feel like she's being picked on. Make it as official as you can. And just lay down the facts. She's been here for a certain amount of time. She's had the proper training. Why can't she do the things that she's required to do? She might be good at one thing, but that is not good enough to do the job. 3. Oh my god, this is actually nuts, folks. Buckle in for this wild ride. I work in internet and mobile sales for a nationwide company in the USA. I am a 5-foot-tall white woman, which is relevant. The customer is an approximately 5'10" black male. Doors close at 8 p.m., and it's 7:45 when the last customer walks in. I'm already tired and ready to be done, so not really ready to put up with baloney. I greet the customer, and he tells me he is coming in for an equipment exchange. Great, let's get it done. Should only take 2 or 3 minutes, typically. Get him over to my station, and pull up his account to ask for ID. We ID every account if we have to open them. For some transactions, like bills or equipment returns, it is not required, but we still ask, to know if the receipt should be redacted or not. Customer states he doesn't have a valid ID, but he has his work ID and the expired ID in his car. I am more specific this time and say, sorry, we would need a valid government ID to issue equipment to you. I can return your equipment, but I will not be able to issue you the new equipment. The customer gets upset. At first it seems like he is upset with the company and just renting. He starts to get pretty loud, so I attempt to calm him down in multiple ways. I'm sorry, sir. I fully believe you are who you say you are, it's just the company requires these things to issue equipment for your security. Things along those lines. I try to make the customer feel like I'm on their side. It helps, sometimes. I call policy silly all the time, although I don't believe what I'm saying. It separates me from the company, and usually calms people down. He literally won't let me speak. I got that sentence in, and he just kept going on with what he was saying before. Loudly, not yelling, but enough to hear across the sales floor. How could I not be me? It's obviously my account. That's my receiver from my account. I have 2 iPhone 15s and my internet with y'all. I was here yesterday to pay my bill. I mean, how could I not be me? It's just that for literally 10 minutes. My manager wasn't there. It was just me and my coworker, so I really couldn't do anything. He wouldn't let me talk, but it wasn't bad enough to call the police, and I'm not joking when I say this was an entire 10-minute interaction. At this point, I told him if I did this, I would lose my job. That's true. If we got audited, I 100% would. He did not care. So I finally got tired of being talked over and abused and tell him very loudly, I'm sorry, but the answer is no. And I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding at all, people. He pulls out his wallet and hands me a valid state ID. What the ever-loving hell? I look at him bewildered. I honestly can't remember a lot of this part because I was so confused. But I remember him posturing up really big and going, huh? And I'm like, why didn't you just give me this? He literally said, because I wanted to see if you was racist. I knew the second I came in here you were going to treat me different because I'm black. Thinking I'm making fraud happen because you're racist. I had like a million thoughts going through my head at this point. Like, what is happening right now? What? Important note, I never said fraud or anything related. I mentioned once the ID is for security, but that's it. I got really uncomfortable and sort of shoved his ID back to him and told him, I'm not helping you. If he wants to help you, he can, but not me. And I left the sales floor. Had to call my boss because I'm sure I'm gonna get a complaint. My boss was laughing because he's black, so he knows firsthand that would be out of character for me. The end. 4. So back when I was 13, I had gotten a work permit in order to save up for some school clothes and name-brand shoes. You see, my mother was on a fixed income due to being on disability, and to put it frankly, we were poor. You see, in school, I had a bit of a reputation for rocking Kmart specials. These things were damn Daniel long before the meme was even a thought. They looked cheap, smelled cheap, and lasted about as long as you would think a cheap pair of shoes would. So rather than bothering my mom for a pair of name-brand shoes I knew she couldn't afford, I decided to earn them. Now at that age, not many places were willing to hire. Essentially, you had a couple of choices. Cart pusher and bagger at a grocery store, or one of the many fast food chains our little tourist trap had to offer. I spent a good portion of the day pounding pavement and turning in applications. Most of the places that were hiring were looking for older people working around alcohol and dangerous equipment. So, deli work was out of the question. Most grocery chains back then, and even today in my old hometown, didn't want to risk sending home one of their younger employees with a couple less fingers because they got a little too careless with the meat slicer. Feeling rather defeated, I decided I would go ahead and stop off at Mickey D's to get a small fry and a caramel nut sundae. This was late May, Memorial Day weekend if I remember correctly, and at that point in time the shore starts to warm up, so I needed something to help me fuel up and cool off at the same time. I get my food, and as I'm sitting in the booth by the exit, I hear a commotion coming from the kitchen. I see a kid, maybe a couple of years older than me, storming out of the back area as he turns and chucks his hat like he was Michael Jackson, in the Smooth Criminal video. He flips the manager on duty the bird and drops a few choice expletives before storming out the door. So POV, I'm sitting there watching as this chaos unfolds, when this tall blonde mountain of a man dressed in a McDonald's managerial uniform darts out of the exit and starts screaming at this kid who was now well out of the parking lot and almost to the other store plaza, and through his thick Eastern European accent, I can only make out the word thief. Only makes sense, I think to myself, as I go back to eating, trying to ignore the situation any further. Suddenly this guy comes barreling through the door, rubbing his forehead, and if I had to wager a guess, cursing in his native tongue under his breath. Me being the curious sort at the time, asked him if everything was okay. He shot me a look like he was going to let me have it with both barrels. And then it hit him. I was a paying customer. I was eating food there. And maybe that wasn't the best idea. He took a deep breath and responded, "No, that bread steal from me. Quit mid-shift. Now we short for dinner rush." Now I said I was curious back then, never necessarily said anything about intelligence. Funny you should mention that. I'm actually out here looking for a job as we speak, just taking a break from doing a lot of walking. I said to him, putting on my best confident smile, "What time does the dinner shift start?" The expression on the manager's face changed from one of pure, unadulterated rage to one of consideration. "5. Why you ask?" I looked down at my watch and I distinctly remember saying, "It's a little after 2. If you're willing to give me a shot, I can be here at 4:30. What do I need to wear?" He looked over his shoulder for a second and then said something once again in his native tongue. In less than a minute, a tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl about 16 came back with an application and handed it to me. She gave me a smile, and in retrospect, it was a bit uneasy. I really should have taken that as my second warning after this man's outburst. But hell, I really wanted some decent clothing that wasn't hand-me-down or thrift. So I swallowed my pride, filled out the application, and let him go ahead and copy my work permit. In less than 20 minutes, I was hired, possibly one of my 3 worst jobs ever. This channel already told the story of my time working as clean-up hotel staff. That job is still holding strong as my number 1. The manager introduces himself. "I'm Yuri." He takes a breath and proceeds to tell me, "You go home, find black pants, black shirt, beat up, nothing good, you clean. Get done at 10. We order uniform tomorrow. Come out first paycheck. You no get paid for 3 weeks. We hold first check." Talking to friends of mine who worked at other fast food establishments, I knew this was commonplace, no big deal to me. As long as I actually saw a paycheck, I was fine. I thank Yuri for being willing to take a chance on me, throw out my garbage, and begin sprinting home. I took a shortcut through the old cemetery that opened up about 8 or so houses from mine. Before I knew it, I was barging through my back door with a grin on my face, so big you would have thought I had walked off the set of the Black Hole Sun music video. "Hell yeah, Mom! I did it! Start at McDonald's tonight! As part of the cleanup crew!" I yelled in excitement. My mom was sitting in the living room enjoying a cup of tea and watching Power Rangers with my little brother. "That's great, honey," she says with pride on her face. "What time do you start?" I told her I would be getting off around 10 p.m., and she was fine with that. She let my dad know that I would need a ride and that I didn't quite have a schedule yet. He was equally as happy to see me taking initiative. He just gave me a thumbs up and confirmed it wouldn't be a problem for him to pick me up around that time. I went into my room and got changed into a pair of black dress pants I had picked up so I would at least have part of a uniform. Those were the bog standard in my area. I grabbed a beat-up Fruit of the Loom black pocket t-shirt and threw that on. I told my parents I would bike in if they were okay with putting it in the truck when they picked me up. Again, nodded in agreement and gave me a thumbs up. Before I knew it, I'd taken off like a rocket and made my way to that god-forsaken place. I arrived just before 4:30 as promised, and Yuri waved me towards the back. I'm standing there waiting for some sort of direction and looking absolutely lost when the girl who handed me the application walks over and that smile is nowhere to be found. She opens her mouth and I'm expecting an introduction, a tour of the kitchen, anything but what I actually got. She begins to speak and I notice she has the same exact accent as Yuri. Something in my brain clicked. She must have been family in some way, shape, or form. Putting my nerves aside for a second, I gazed around the kitchen, and I realized that all except for one Hispanic gentleman, working the deep fryers, that this was the most Aryan kitchen I've ever been in. The girl snaps her fingers at me in order to get my attention, and in a gruff voice, she finally introduced herself as Linka.
"I give you maybe 2 weeks, 3 tops."
She proceeds to walk through the evening protocol, after she tells me that the only time I'll be in the kitchen is during closing or if something spills. She tells me about Yuri's ridiculous 10-cup rule, no more than 10 cups at a time in each of the dispensers, which I find quite counterproductive even at that age, but I say nothing because I get the feeling she would shoot my head off, and she could chew my head off at the base of my neck without thinking twice. She then takes me over to the restroom area and tells me that I can only go into the women's room if we're empty. Understandable, and shows me how to refill the hand soap dispensers. It was at this point tiny alarm bells are going off. When she opens up the dispenser, I notice the bag has a bit of a slit in it. She shows me how to pinch the bag near the slit so it opens, and proceeds to take the cup I hadn't noticed she was holding over the sink, where she fills it up with lukewarm water. She then dumps it into the bag of pink hand soap and gives it a little rustle.
"You don't change bag until pink goes clear. We save money this way."
I look down sheepishly and nod understandingly. She takes me over to the meat freezer where they kept the burger patties, chicken nuggets, typical McDonald's fare. She tells me to make sure the floor is mopped at the end of the night and go ahead and check expiration dates. This way it saves time for the kitchen staff. And then she takes me to the last location, the employee break room. She walks over to a handwritten piece of yellow school-ruled notebook paper, taped on the microwave door.
You work here. You get free meal, but only this.
The note reads, free meal for employee. You only allowed to have 1 hamburger or 1 fish sandwich and small drink. No cheeseburger, no fries, no soda. Only no sweet tea or water. Nothing else. You get something else that come out of pay. Signed, Yuri. The longer I stayed there, mind you, it was my first night, the more intense that sinking feeling became. But this is a job, and I just chalked it up to first night jitters. I went ahead and followed every rule to the letter and got my work done fairly efficiently. Nothing was said to me, alluding to me screwing up, so I saw that as a win. 8:30 rolled around and people started going home. Linka waved me back to the kitchen. She unlocks the janitor's closet and rolls out the mop bucket.
You ain't dead. You clean bathrooms. When done, come back here. I show you what to do with meat freezer.
I made my way to the men's room, and before I found myself in the eating area among the other customers, I asked her, "What about the women's room?" She rolled her eyes at me and pointed to the people in the dining area.
Too many people. If you no do tonight, Katya be here tomorrow. She clean it.
I gave her a quick nod and made my way into the bathroom. Thankfully, it wasn't too bad. A spritz of 409 here, some Pine Sol there. I was done fairly quickly. Midway to the janitor's closet in order to dump the water down the drain, Linka stops me. She had this look of caution on her face. She gently put her hand on my shoulder and looked me dead in the eyes.
Don't let Yuri see you dumping that.
Weird statement, but okay. She then cocks an eyebrow and asks me the strangest question I could have been asked that night.
You smoke?
I'd chuckle and look her dead in the eyes while shooting her a grin, and I give her the classic I don't know gesture while saying I'm 13, what do you think? She chuckles and gives me a look like she knows it's a dumb question. This is the first time all evening I see her displaying an attitude I can't describe as domineering. She walks over to the back door and waves me on to follow her. The door shuts and she starts speaking.
Look, I'm sorry for the way I act tonight. Sure you guess Yuri is my dad. Most other staff my cousins except Martin. I hate working for him. Too many rules, too cheap, bad attitude. I take it out on you all night and it's wrong.
I wasn't expecting the apology, but her attitude towards me changed dramatically for the rest of the night. Turns out she was actually quite sweet, just stressed. She took me into the meat freezer and showed me where to check expiration dates. I came across a couple of boxes of patties and nuggets that were getting ready to expire the next day. This basically meant if it wasn't used by tomorrow, it needed to be thrown out. She told me to put those to the front, and I did. After that, it was just a matter of mopping the floor in the meat freezer and working my way out into the kitchen. By that point, the crowd had dispersed, and most of the staff, aside from Linka, Martin, and myself, had either left or were getting ready to leave. Martin finally had a chance to properly introduce himself. He was a college-age guy, pretty friendly, hard-working as all get out. He asked me to help him take the garbage to the dumpster about 10 minutes to 10. I agree because many hands make light work. We get to the dumpster, and he starts acting shifty. Looking from side to side as if to make sure nobody was watching, I watch him untie the bags. He asked me to help him lift them, and dumps loose garbage into the dumpster before taking the bags over to the side and giving them a good shake to make sure nothing was left in there. And then watch him as we go back into the kitchen. He reuses the bags. Wait a minute, I exclaim while shooting Martin a disgusted look. Yeah, man, I'm sure Link already told you how cheap Yuri is. He reuses trash bags until they rip. Mop water gets dumped out every 3 days, unless there's vomit or fecal matter in it. And I'm certain you've noticed that stupid 10-cup rule as well as the employee break room sign. He cuts corners everywhere, man. You know the kid that quit earlier today? I shake my head. Yes? It was Jim, his stepson. The thing he supposedly stole? He wanted to have a cherry pie with his lunch. We don't even sell that many, but yeah, Yuri flipped one too many times and Jim just said screw it. Give it a week, you're going to find this is one of the weirdest places you'll ever work. We gave the kitchen area and all the other spots I had to a quick clean once over, just to make sure everything was done correctly. I get out a little bit before 10:30 and my stepdad gets ready to drive me home. Suddenly there's a knock on the passenger side window. Linka is standing there with a piece of paper in her hand.
Almost forget to give schedule. You do good job tonight, thank you. Have a good night.
With that, I shoot her a smile and my stepdad starts to drive home. I open up the piece of paper and take note of the fact that Yuri had Linka schedule me 2 weeks in advance on Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday morning. Each shift was roughly 4 hours. Okay, I'd be getting a paycheck, half of it was going to be withheld, but if I was smart and saved up, I would be able to get the aforementioned shoes and clothing. I pinned it to the corkboard in my bedroom and made my way to the shower. I'll tell you, there was nothing more satisfying at the end of that day. It just hit differently. I managed to get a job, and I was honestly cleaning off the work gunk, and I couldn't be happier. I went to bed knowing full well I would have another shift the next day, but this one was going to be a Saturday morning shift. The only one on the schedule. I just told myself they were going to try and get me acclimated to both shifts, and I fell asleep before my head hit the pillow. The next morning, I eat a quick breakfast and a cup of coffee as quickly as I can without scalding my throat, get dressed and head to work. Upon arriving, I'm greeted by a short, stocky brunette woman, I would say mid to late 20s. She shakes my hand and introduces herself as Katya. Unlike Linka, she gave off kind of a meek vibe. She spoke in low tones and nervously repeated herself. She kept looking out in the parking lot while sipping a small cup of coffee. And suddenly I see her demeanor change. I hear the roar of a loud engine and look to see an orange metallic 1990s Ford Mustang pulling into the parking lot. Katya immediately sprints back to the kitchen and gets rid of the coffee. I'm standing there thinking to myself, why did she do that? And then I see Yuri step out of the driver's seat. Would he be so callous as to fire her over a cup of coffee? I mean, he was accusing his own stepchild of thievery over a semi-stale cherry pie. So that was entirely within the realm of possibility. And I got this notion, and the fact that I got this notion at 13 still disturbs me to this day. She was afraid of that man. To the point she was bordering on a nervous breakdown while introducing herself to me. I said hello to him as he walked into the dining area. He doesn't even acknowledge me. He just kind of moves sporadically on his way back to his office. And sweet, innocent 13-year-old me guessed his allergies were bothering him and that he must have gotten a powdered donut on his way to work because of the obvious powder on his upper lip. Yeah, it doesn't take a rocket surgeon to put that together these days, but I was an ignorant kid. I make my way to the back in order to find Katya and find out what I'm supposed to do morning shift, only to find she has taken the mop bucket out of the janitor's closet, and I assume she's cleaning the women's restroom. But she's gone for close to 2 hours. I basically went ahead and did busy work while I waited for her to tell me what I actually needed to do, and that never happened. Roughly 3/4 of the way through my shift, I tried to talk to Yuri and mention the nuggets and patties from the night before. He just grunts at me and waves me out of his office. Okay, I figure maybe somebody else brought it to his attention. I proceed to grab the cleaning cart so I could at least go out to the dining area and give that a quick once-over. I was certain at that point there were ashtrays that needed dumping, tables that needed wiping, and I could go ahead and try to do the windows. No sooner had I started dumping out whatever ashtrays I could find that needed it, I hear Martine's voice yelling at somebody in Portuguese. I get back into the kitchen again, curiosity, and Martine is yelling at Yuri and Katya about something. I see Katya walk out the back door for a moment and then come back in with 2 boxes. She makes her way to the meat freezer and walks out a second later empty-handed. I'm not using those. Fire me if you want, but I am not going to use those. Martine is screaming at the 2. Yuri laughed under his breath and looked at Martine before saying something that only the 2 of them could hear. I see Martine's fists ball up, and I wait for one of them to connect with Yuri's jaw. Instead, Martine took off his apron, threw his name tag in the sink, used a few choice words, and walked right out of the front door. Not going to lie, I snuck into the meat freezer to find out what exactly was going on, and it didn't take me long to figure out exactly what the problem was. There were 2 boxes that were supposed to get used up by the end of the day. They were warm to the touch and somehow soaking wet and reeking of pine sol. The mop bucket was in the meat freezer, and when I looked down into the bucket, there were chicken nuggets floating at the top. That was all the evidence I needed. The thing is, this McDonald's was located across the street from another business plaza. And when I say business, I don't mean the 99-cent store or some discount shoe outlet. There was a lawyer's office there, and it was right next to... you guessed it, the health department. I took off my name tag and apron and left it on Yuri's desk before saying, "Yeah, I'm out. It's too wild here." Yuri didn't even bat an eye. It was almost as if he expected this. So I unchained my bike from the rack, out front, and pedaled off to do something he didn't expect. I ran through the health department doors like I was being chased by hornets. It was a Saturday, they weren't too far off from closing for the day, and there was very little staff. I ran up to the front desk and started smacking the top of it in order to get everyone's attention. I apologized for my rudeness, but then very loudly mentioned that the health inspector needs to get to the Mickey D's across the street like yesterday. I mentioned they were trying to serve meat that had been in the dumpster long enough to get warm, and had fallen into a mop bucket full of pine sol that had just been used to clean the women's restroom. I see the health inspector rise a little from the desk in his office, almost like a Dollar Tree Batman, who spotted the rat signal emblazoned on the night sky. He grabbed his black billfold and took off like a bat out of hell right towards those golden arches. I bike over there, and I find a vantage point that keeps me out of the direct line of sight but allows me to see the entrance. It wasn't 5 minutes before I notice a parking lot full of very angry customers, either walking back to their cars or waiting in the parking lot. I then see Yuri yelling at the health inspector as he walks out the front door, writing something before sticking it to the outside window. He talks to Yuri and explains to him exactly what the paper meant, and then I see Yuri do one of the dumbest things I've ever seen an adult pull. He takes a swing at the health inspector. Full-on left hook. However, the health inspector ducked it, causing Yuri to swing wildly and punch the glass door so hard he cracked the glass panel. Judging by the way he was screaming, he definitely broke some fingers. The health inspector took this opportunity to sprint in my direction back towards the plaza. I head in the same direction and walk into the offices with the inspector. And who is sitting there waiting for him to come back when we walk in the door? Martin. He just looked at me, laughed his butt off, and said, "Well, damn, looks like you beat me to it, kiddo." The three of us sat in the health inspector's office, and we basically recited the litany of violations that man pulled in order to save a couple of bucks. When all that got back to the inspector, it was enough to do two things: have that location shut down for a while, and anger McDonald's themselves so badly that they stripped Yuri of his ability to be a franchisee. The place was closed down for a month. Mickey D's basically fired everybody that was affiliated with Yuri, save for a couple of people I hadn't met yet. The real kicker? Not only do they hire back Martin, but he comes back as the store manager with better pay and the benefits. However, he would only keep that job for a few months. Eventually, he would go on to join the Coast Guard. Last I heard, we're going back a few years, he was moving up the ranks and held a relatively high position. I would also end up running into Katya a couple of summers later. I expected her to want to throttle me. After all, I had cost her her job. It was no big secret as to who reported the disgusting BS that went on in that place. But quite the contrary, she not only smiled when she saw me, she threw her arms around me and gave me a giant hug like I was an old friend she hadn't seen in ages. "Well, I'll call that a surprise," I said as she stopped giving me the hug.
"Why such a surprise?"
she asked me quizzically. "Well, I cost..." She put up a finger and tells me to shush.
"No, you actually make things better for me. Better for my stepmom. She divorced my dad. She went back to Serbia. I am full-time college student now, trying to become veterinarian." We spent a little bit of time together just hanging out on the boardwalk, playing some skee-ball and some of the carnival-style games, and we just catch up. Apparently what I had missed that day was the police showing up to arrest Yuri for taking a swing at the health inspector. He was on the phone before calling Martin and I into the office to take a statement from each of us. And I'm guessing that's who he was on the phone with. When the police arrested him and did that typical "are you carrying anything we should know" line of questioning, Yuri said no. But upon doing a pat-down, they found a bag of Colombian dancing powder on him, as well as an unregistered small-caliber handgun on his person. Concealed carry was not legal in that state when I was younger, and as far as I know, still isn't.
So he got tagged for possession of an illegal substance, possession of an unlicensed handgun, concealment, and attempted assault of a government official. So he didn't leave so much as he got deported. As Katya relayed all of this to me, I'll admit I wasn't surprised. But damn, it was overwhelming. And the whole time she had this smile on her face, it just screamed freedom. We hung out well into the night. And this is right around the time I was working in that damned hotel. But she felt like she could open up to me about so many other things. Some of the things I'm not going to touch, because I just don't feel like I have the right to do so. But I will say this much from everything she told me, that man was a controlling monster. He was terrible to his children, terrible to his family, and did absolutely unforgivable things. One of the things she mentioned to me was that a few of those things would have had him lined up in front of a firing squad back in their home country. I've looked all over social media. I haven't found Katya on anything in regards to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I just hope veterinary school worked out for her. I've tried Googling her name and veterinary practices just to see if results would come up, and I'm guessing there's a chance she's now married. And it sucks we fell out of contact. But I would understand if that was a chapter of her life she wanted to leave behind. In any case, Katya, if by some small miracle you happen to be on YouTube and you've stumbled upon this story, I'm truly sorry for everything you went through, and as I've gotten older, things started making more sense. I don't hold the initial standoffishness against you, especially since you apologized for later on in the day. That just goes to show the quality of character you have. I wish nothing but the best for you and yours. You're a good person. You deserve it all. And with that, I'll conclude my story by saying if you're working a job where things seem off, corners get cut to dangerous degrees, no matter how bad you feel you need that paycheck, sacrificing what's right for a few dollars just isn't worth it. Yes, I never got my paycheck. As dejected as I felt over that, my martial arts instructor came through in a clutch. He and the class got together and put together enough money for me to hit up our local marshals and get some name brand stuff for school. It was a nice surprise toward the end of that summer, and I will always be thankful for that. Rest easy, Sensei. You were a good man. 5. This happened in the suburbs of a major U.S. city. I see so many stories that are high drama, and people being just, well, insufferable. I wanted to share with you a kind and understanding I don't work here lady exchange. This is what happens when the confused person actually believes you when you tell them you don't work at a place. In a prior post, I mentioned when I was in college, I worked as a store manager for a local home improvement or hardware store that was staffed with helpful hardware people who wore red polo shirts. During my tenure there, I had built relationships with our customers, particularly regular DIY-type homeowners and contractors. Now, I'm not a small guy. In that time period, I was taller than I am now due to some injuries, and was quite fit as the job was very physical. I had long hair, and several of my colleagues and coworkers would call me Thor any time I would go to straighten out the tool aisle and tidy up the hammers. Haha, very funny. Now, my post-graduation field career is in computers, and I, at the time, worked for a company that had me doing field service work on systems that were distributed through a facility, meaning I had to navigate around moving forklifts, trucks, and generally idiot drivers to get me to the systems I was working on. So I tended to wear bright orange shirts, as close to Hunter's blaze orange as I could find for a long time. This is a key factor here to my story. Well, post-graduation and a couple of years into my career after the hardware business, I had bought a home and was doing some work to fix it up. And I had made a beeline for the big box store, you know, the big orange retail giant, or Borg for short. And I did so on my way home after work. At the Borg Cube closest to my old store that I worked at in college, I was standing at the customer side of the paint department counter, waiting for a paint department person to come and help me do a color match so I could repaint my garage doors, as the previous owner didn't bother repainting before they sold me the house. I'm in my own little world with my color sample, a notepad, and a pencil, sketching out some plans for a project I was working on, when a woman in her, I would guess, mid-40s, overdressed for a Borg cube, and just reeking too much of perfume, nearly sprinted to me. slapped down a piece of paper with a sample of her paint on it and said, "I need 3 gallons of this, I'll be right back," and was off to the back of the store with her cart before I could say a word. What look I could see on her face was more frazzled than entitled. The staff member came to the counter immediately after, and I had told them I needed a gallon of my color in my desired finish, in this brand's finest latex paint. I also explained about the woman's paint sample, and I told the paint clerk I'll be back in 5 minutes. I strolled the aisles in the direction the lady went, and saw that she was in the electrical aisle looking at telecom and network-related stuff. Kind of my thing. As I strolled up to her, she looked at me with a questioning look and asked me, "Is it done already?" I simply replied, "Ma'am, I believe you've mistaken me for an employee here, and even if I was, I couldn't fill your order with the information you gave me. The paint clerk is here if you'd like to give him the kind of paint you want and what finish you'd like." She stammered a bit, but you were... And then she stopped. "I'm so sorry. You used to work at the Helpful Hardware store, didn't you?" "Yes, ma'am. But I'm working with computers now. I guess the orange shirt threw you off." She proceeded to tell me how her husband was laid up with an injury, and the HOA started to fuss about some exterior paint on their house. She was terrified of what they would do. I gave her the phone number of a friend that did paint contracting as a side hustle to help her and her husband out. As we talked, I helped her pick out a splitter, some coax, and other bits and pieces to extend the coax literally through the wall behind the living room and into the master suite so they could have TV in the bedroom. I then walked her to the paint department. She told the guy that they really ought to hire me. I laughed and told both of them and her, "No thanks, the folks here work too hard." Not long after, I discovered her husband was a higher up at a company that was one of my company's biggest clients. And after this exchange, he liked giving me highly complimentary customer surveys for every service call I did for them. So yeah, patience and kindness pay off sometimes. No big drama, no entitled attitude, just a nice older-than-me at-the-time lady needing some help, and being a little confused by a familiar face out of context. I often wonder about these I don't work here lady stories. How could they possibly be that far out of whack? I still wonder. I'm sure it's been at least 20 years since this exchange. He retired, I moved on a couple of jobs since then. I hope they are living well into their retirement. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Adventures in Fast Food and Retail, episode 205. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button and share the video with friends and family. If you'd like early access to these videos, then support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. You'll also find links there to the Hellfreezer Discord server if you'd like to join us there, as well as the Hellfreezer merchandise store on Teespring. And if you'd like to leave a tip, if you especially enjoyed today's video, you can do that by clicking on the little heart with a $sign underneath the video. And while that is never required, it is very much appreciated and helpful. Okay, we don't have any other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, have you ever found something that it doesn't compute as to why it's so expensive? Like, for example, I could go buy some green cloth, and I'm sure it would be cheaper than buying a green screen, which I'm still trying to do, than it would be just to buy the green cloth. Or buy like a green bed sheet would probably be cheaper overall than buying the green screen, at least getting a decent quality one. So is there anything in your life you just kind of raise an eyebrow when you see the price of it because it's only what they call it that makes it more expensive? There's nothing about it that would justify the added price other than the name. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video. And this was in relation to what people think about microcars. And today's answer comes from Lauren. I love the idea of small. I've even considered a tiny home. I worried about safety, but read that they are not allowed on highways, and can't go fast enough even if you wanted to, so any accident would be at lower speeds and statistically less fatal. As far as being electric, they have to use pollutants to make the electricity, and disposing of the battery is an environmental nightmare, so it's not perfect. but if it means I don't have to go to the filthy, smelly gas station, I'm in. Thank you very much for your answer, Lauren. I believe there are some microcars now that are getting to the point where, as the technology is more proven, they can go on highways. That doesn't count for all of them, though, but some of them can. And the battery thing is getting more efficient all the time. And yeah, they do still have to use fuel at the moment to make the electricity, but I think it's less overall. Plus, there's power coming from various other sources, as we as a species get more used to the idea of pulling power from wherever we can, like wind power, nuclear power, solar power. It's all good. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.